Hi class, today's preparation is about equivalent uniform annual cost. So your intended learning outcome for today, what I want you to get out of this in the corresponding assignment, I want you to be able to calculate the equivalent uniform annual cost, or EUAC, of an investment. That'll allow you to compare alternatives for investment opportunities that have different time periods. So here's an example. You need new tires for a pickup. This was in the preparation document. Option A is you can get the cheap tires. They're $880 and they last just 3 years. Or you can get the premium tires for $1150 and they'll last you 5 years. So you have a bank account that earns 2% interest. So that's the interest rate that we'll use for our problem. How do you compare those two options? So you might think initially the NPV, right? You say $880 now, and they last 3 years, so $880 is the NPV. And the premium tire is $1150. That I'm paying that now, so that's also the NPV. We don't have to have any discount factors because we're talking about present charge. You can't salvage them. The tires are no good to you later. And so you'd say, oh, the cheap tires are less expensive. But the NPV, just that analysis anyways, you can consider these things with NPV, but that naive analysis doesn't consider that you'll have to replace the cheap tires in just 3 years. And so you're going to have to keep on replacing them. So one way you could approach this is you could say, all right, well, I'm going to break this up into time period of 15 years. And over that 15 years, I'm going to have to buy the cheap tires 5 times, and I'll have to buy the premium tires 3 times. And so then they have the same time period, right? And that cycle could potentially repeat into the future, but I can just consider this 15 years cycle, and I could calculate the NPV for those two options over that 15-year cycle, and I'll assume the answer is going to be the same in the future when the cycle of buying tires repeats. But the reason I've chosen 15 years is because that's a common multiple of the 3 years of the cheap tires and the 5 years of the premium tires, etc. So you could compare like that. Another way that's maybe a little less confusing to think about is using the equivalent uniform annual cost. So the procedure for that is you determine the net present value of that investment. So yeah, it was just $800 for, or was it $880? $880 for the cheap tires. That's the NPV for A, and the NPV for B was $1150. Determine the NPV. Got those. Now convert them to annuities for the life of the option. So the life of option A is 3 years. I'm going to convert the 880 present value to an annuity that lasts for 3 years. I'm going to convert the 1150 for option B from the present value of 1150 to an annuity over 5 years. So how do we do that? We just use the discount factor that converts from P to A. So we'll write out the symbol in a second. By the way, just a note that per convention, equivalent uniform annual cost, when I probably should have saved this for later, but there's the term cost in the title, right? And so typically now we are going to consider costs to be positive and money coming in as negative. So you kind of flip the sign by convention when you're doing this analysis. There's only one reason I mention it. Like if you were doing this analysis on your own, you would just remember, oh, I got to convert things to annuities, and you could probably figure out whether a lower number or a higher number is better for the sake of analysis. So you need to remember when you're weighing your options, whether you flip the sign according to this convention or not, you just need to think about, which sign, do you want it to be more positive or do you want it to be more negative? Another reason that this is important to mention is that on the FE exam, they could potentially trip you up by asking for equivalent uniform annual cost. And if you have done your analysis by assuming that anything that is cost is negative, and you convert that to an annuity and you'll find that annuity is negative, then you might think, oh, you've got a negative equivalent uniform annual cost when it should be positive. Okay, so for the FE exam, you need to keep that in mind as well. So it's just the negative of the equivalent annuity. So then you compare the two equivalent uniform annual costs. And in this case, because we have said that a cost is now positive, you want the lower cost. You want the less positive number. Okay. An example, option A, cheap tires. Here's the net present value. Let's convert that into an annuity. We take the discount factor, A over P. We're going to multiply that by our P, right? So that's how we know that we want the A if we have the P. For 2% interest over the course of the life of those tires, last 3 years, here's your discount factor. We're going to multiply the $880 by that discount factor, and we'd find that it's $305 per year. On the other hand, if we have the net present value for option B, we can convert that to an equivalent uniform annual cost. Here's our discount factor, the corresponding with 5 years now, because that's the life of that investment option. That has a discount factor of 0.2122. And you will find by multiplying that discount factor by the present value amount to get the annuity, it is $244 per year. These are listed as positive numbers, the 880 and 1150, because they are costs when we're talking about equivalent uniform annual cost. We've shown them with NPV, they're listed as minus values, net present value. The value is negative, the cost is positive. So that's the bit about the sign convention. So effectively, option B is the better financial decision because it has a lower cost. Equivalent uniform annual cost. Here's another example. This one's going to take a little bit more time, so you're welcome to pause the video if you want to mull over that for a little bit, maybe solve those example problems if you haven't already done that from the FE review manual. Maybe try those out, but then come back and let's work through a more detailed example. You've been working for 10 years and you're deciding whether to buy a home or you want to continue renting. So you can rent your house. Let's start up at the top. I meant to animate this, but you can rent your house for $2,700 per month for 3 years, after which the owners plan to sell the house. Okay? It's going to cost you $5,000 to move because your family has a lot of stuff, and you'll initially, remember, have to put down a $3,000 deposit, which you'll get back when you move. Finally, it's kind of important to make some assumptions about what you're going to do in the future. You assume that this is going to repeat over and over again. And so you're going to make your decision based on the equivalent uniform annual cost of the next 3 years for this option. And this cycle is going to repeat because you're going to have to keep on renting and your owners are still going to only let you stay there for 3 years and you're going to have to move. Right? If your assumptions were different, then you maybe wouldn't choose this method of analysis. You might say, oh, I have to move in 3 years and then I'm going to be paying a different amount of rent and I'm never going to have to move again. Well, then your analysis is going to change. But if you assume that you're going to have to do this sort of thing over and over again, then whatever decision you make based on the equivalent uniform annual cost for the next 3 years is going to be good in 3 years from now, and 3 years after that. You're going to keep on making the same decision. So overall, the equivalent uniform annual cost is a good number to go by. So you're assuming that you're going to pay similar amounts in rent in the future after you move, etc. Okay. Option B, you can buy your house. It's going to cost $700,000, but you only have enough in savings to put 15% down, so you're going to need a mortgage that covers the rest. A mortgage is just a name for a really big loan, typically used for houses. Your typical monthly payment is going to be approximately $3,500, and that doesn't just include money that's going towards $700,000, right? You think, oh, well, I'm going to be paying $7,000 every 2 months. It should only take me 200 months then to pay off $700,000, right? No, you're going to end up this is going towards not just the principal of the loan, you have to pay interest on that loan. And I haven't specified what the interest rate is for that loan. You don't need it because we've actually got several different percentages here. We got a 1% here. You got 2% in your bank account. You've got the interest APR of the loan. You don't need to consider the interest on this loan in this problem because it is all lumped into this $3,500 to the annuity. Now, if on the FE exam or something they give you a problem like that, and they give you an interest rate for the loan, and that's different from the interest rate in your bank account, you might need to think carefully about which is the interest rate you're going to use for calculating your discount factors. I'm not going to elaborate on that much further. If you have questions, ask in office hours. So in this case, the $3,500 includes any interest. We don't need to know that interest rate, and that's not the interest rate that we're going to use for our discount factors in this problem. You're going to be paying property taxes. The local governments charge money because you own property. That's how they make some money. Homeowners insurance, yeah, that's required by most lenders. Whereas renter's insurance is typically optional. And finally, any repairs that come along the way, you think that a few $100s extra on this number is going to help you whenever your water heater breaks or whatever. As a renter, you don't have to worry about that, right? Closing costs are going to be approximately 1% of the purchase price. In this case, they can be anywhere from 1% to 4%, I think are numbers that I've seen. But we're going to say 1% for now, because you got lucky and you're, for various reasons, your seller's agent, the real estate agent who's taking you around to look at homes, or actually is the same person as the person who's selling the house, and they don't have to do as much work because they actually didn't have to show the home to anybody else. This was happening in my case now. This is loosely based on example of me having to buy a house recently. So these include various fees charged by your lender, the escrow office, and the local government. So you have to pay these closing costs, and you don't get that money back ever. So the escrow office is a place that money gets put basically before it as a middleman or middle person between middle entity between you and the sellers. And also the local government is going to ask for some recording fees and various things. Also, your lender might charge what's called an origination fee on that loan, which is basically money to thank them for their services. Also, there are points that you can add. We'll learn more about loans later on, but these are all things that will go into the closing costs. That is money that you will never get back. But after 30 years, you think you can sell the house for $1,400,000. That's that might be a reasonable amount, right? That's doubled over the 30-year period, whereas the median home price in California has tripled over the past 30 years. Now, it's uncertain what the markets will do, but maybe that's what you're going to assume for this analysis, okay? So here's some more thoughts. Your bank account earns 2% nominal interest annually. So this is the interest you should use in your problem, because ultimately this is your other investment option. There's always an option C, in which case you hold your money in a bank account and, well, excuse me, it's part of all these options, right? Any money that you don't put into the down payment, right? Because if you went with option A instead, you wouldn't have as much of a down payment. Any of that money goes into your bank account. It's earning 2% interest annually. So that's why it's important to include this 2% as the interest rate for your problem. Which of these two options is a better financial decision when you consider that interest? Okay, so here's our approach. We're going to calculate the net present value of each option. We're going to calculate the equivalent uniform annual cost of each option by converting that NPV to an annuity for the term of the option. And then finally, we're going to compare the equivalent uniform annual costs. Now, you could go directly from the cash flows in the problem to annuities, right? You could directly go to an EUAC without ever calculating the net present value, but just to make things a little bit simpler to learn, you're going to have just one extra step It's not strictly necessary, but it makes it a little bit simpler, right? You already know how to calculate the net present value. All you need to do then is convert that single number to an equivalent uniform annual cost. So it makes it a little bit simpler, right? Starting out. And then you compare those costs. Okay, so here's option A and what the analysis is going to look like in broad strokes before we get into the details. The rent is a $2,700 annuity, right? It's happening monthly. The word annuity came from the word annual, but we're going to do this problem on a monthly basis, and we know that it doesn't really matter whether it's years or months. All we care about is periods and making sure the interest rate is consistent with the period. The deposit is going to be $3,000 one time at the present, and this is money that's going out. When we calculate net present value, this will be a negative number. When we calculate equivalent uniform annual cost, this will end up contributing to the cost and making it more positive. $3,000 one-time future. So this is money that you're going to, when you get the deposit back, they're not going to give it back to you with interest. It's money that you've lost and they give you your check back, or they, So $3,000 one-time future payment to you. And then finally, moving is going to be $5,000 one-time future payment that you make at t is equal to 36 months. Okay, so step one, we're going to try to calculate the net present value. So when we were calculating the net present value, the first thing we need to do is kind of identify those cash flows. We've already done that. That's step A. We've already done that first step, calculating what those cash flows are. B, I think we needed to determine our interest rate. Now we said that the annual nominal interest rate of your bank account was 2%, but we need to convert that to monthly because we're doing our analysis monthly. R is equal to 0.02. So I, in this case, the effective monthly rate is R divided by 12 is equal to 0.001667. See, we need to determine the number of years we're talking about for most things in our problem. It depends on the cash flow itself. We're going to have various, I think we've kind of figured that out there. We need to then figure out our discount factors. So what are our discount factors here? Well, this annuity is going to have a discount factor. It's for 3 years or 36 total months. So the discount factor corresponding with that annuity, or with corresponding with rent, we'll write down the discount factor we're going to need is, we're going to need to calculate a present value. So we're going to take that and we're going to get the P over the A, because we're going to multiply by an A, we're going to get the present value. P over A, I%, whatever's up there, and for 36 months, and we'll look these up in a second. Deposit. So the deposit, the payment, we're going to need a present over present, right? We pay the deposit at the present, so actually we just know that's going to be 1. We get the deposit back, and for that we're going to have to convert that future payment at t equals 36 into a present value. So we want the present value given the future payment at that interest rate I up here, and that's going to happen 36 months in the future. We'll look that up in a second. And finally, moving, that's also a one-time future payment, so we can basically just reuse that discount factor before. So let's look these values up. I'm going to enter them into my table. Okay, so looking these up in the spreadsheet, this discount factor is 34.9131, and this one here is 0.9418. Okay, so the last step of calculating the net present value is multiply by our discount factors and add everything together. So we have $2,700. For the sake of net present value, that is a negative amount because we're going to have to pay that every month. Remember, we're going to convert that later when we convert to equivalent uniform annual cost, but the value is negative. Multiply that by our discount factor of 34.9131, and we're going to add our deposit amount to that, which is a negative $3,000. The discount factor is 1. We don't have to show that. We're going to plus add this getting deposit back. We've got plus $3,000 multiplied by 0.9418. It's not as valuable getting our money back in the future because we've lost out on some interest. And moving, we're going to have to pay a certain amount, so we can subtract $5,000, but that's in the future, so it has also that factor of 0.9418. We'd only need 5,000 times 0.9418. If we had that money now, we could put it in the bank account and pay for moving then, right? So that's a way of interpreting why the net present value is only a fraction of what that future value is. All right, if we add all these things up, negative $99,148.97. Lots of money going out for rent. All right, step 2 of this is we're going to take that and we're going to convert that into an annuity. So we're going to take that NPV and we're going to turn it into an equivalent uniform annual cost by multiplying it by a negative 1, because it becomes a cost instead of a value. And we're also going to have to find the discount factor. So we need the discount factor for the EUAC. We need the discount factor corresponding with spreading this amount as a payment over the next 36 months. So we need the symbol that converts, that gives us an A from a present value at whatever our interest rate is, corresponding with 36 months. All right, that's the one we need. So that, we can look that up in our table. Or actually, think about it, we had the P over A for 36 months, right? 34.9131. We can just 1 divided by that. It's the reciprocal of that. If you have the P over A, then the A over P has got to be the reciprocal of that. But we can also look it up in our table. That's 0.0286. So our EUAC is the net present value multiplied by this discount factor and negative 1. So we're going to multiply the $99,148.97, multiply that by the factor of 0.0286, and we get 2,835.66. All right. Okay, so option B, we need to calculate the equivalent uniform annual cost of that. The monthly payment is $3,500. That's an annuity. You have closing costs. That's a one-time present payment of $7,000. Your down payment is $105,000. We said we could do 15% up front. 15% of $70,000 is $105,000. That's a one-time present payment. We're going to sell it in 30 years. T equals 360 months for $1,400,000. That's a future payment, one time. And finally, should probably consider that we have to move then. Right? There's a whole other option, is you could keep the house. And then you say, all right, well, what is my expected lifetime after I've finished buying the house? And so there's no more payments after that. You don't sell it, but you also don't move, right? Whereas if you were renting, you'd have to consider that you have to keep on paying for rent in the future throughout your retirement. That's another advantage of getting the house. But we're going to sell it and we're going to move somewhere else, right? So we're just considering our options over the next 30 years. Okay, so step 1, we need to calculate the NPV. Well, we've already figured out what our different cash flows are. Fine. Our interest rate is the same, so that's part A. Part B is figuring out the interest rate for the problem. We've already got that. I is 2% divided by 12. C is the number of years we've kind of figured out the years at which these occur. D, we need to calculate our discount factors. So we've got our annuity. Let's figure out what we need to get the present value, right? We're looking for the net present value for this first part. So we need to get the discount factor that's P over the A, because we've got an annuity. We want to get present value. It's monthly for 360 months, for the full 360 months of the period. So we'll calculate what that is in a little bit. Let's indicate that this is our monthly payment. All right, we've got closing. Our discount factor is 1, right? Closing cost is a present payment, discount factor of 1. Same thing with the down payment. Discount factor is 1. Sale. Got $1,400,000. Future payment at t equals 360. So let's look at my spreadsheet, but we need the symbol for that. So we want a present. We've got a future value, and it's 360 months in the future. And finally, moving. Well, it's a future payment as well. It's basically just the same. Like, this is kind of like the equivalent of getting your deposit back. This is the same as moving. They're both going to have the same discount factor. So let's look them up on our spreadsheet here. After 360 months, discount factor P over A is 270.5485. And P over F is 0.5491. All right, so last step then. We're going to calculate the NPV. NPV is equal to our initial $3,500 annuity, that's a negative, multiplied by 270.5485, its discount factor. I'll just write out all the rest of them. Okay, so the net present value of that over 30 years is negative $292,925. So you're not making money off this house relative to just keeping your money in a bank account. But let's see if you, because you're paying more in interest over that time than you would. The interest rate that the bank is using is higher than the interest rate you can be earning. So part 2, we need to convert that to a EUAC. So the EUAC is equal to, EUAC is equal to whatever the net present value is times a discount factor that converts we want the annuity, we have the present amount at I% interest and 360 months. So that is, I'll just write it out. $1,083.82. So let's compare against our other option. We have the option to have EUAC of $2,835, buying the house $1,083.82. So this has the lower equivalent uniform annual cost, and so it's the better option in our case.